Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming. I think we are waiting for one more panelist, so we'll probably give her a couple minutes, but then we'll start shortly. All right, well, I guess we can get started. Thank you all for coming tonight and being in this panel. This is hosted by PathSig, or the Virtual Pathology Interest Group. My name is Emily Hartsoe, and I'm a fourth-year medical student at the University of Minnesota, and I will be one of the moderators of this session today.
Hi, everyone. My name is Ashley Rose Scholl, and I'm a fourth-year medical student at WVU, West Virginia University, and I'll also be moderating this session. So just a reminder, please make sure that your microphone is muted unless you're speaking. So to start, we'll ask the panelists some of the questions that have been submitted ahead of time, and time permitting, we will go over questions submitted in the Zoom chat at the end. And we plan to end the panel by 9:30 Eastern Time. With that being said, I'd like to introduce the panelists. Panelists, after I say your name, if you could please state your position and which institution you're at, that would be great. Also, please let me know if I mispronounce any of your names. So first we have Dr. Mirza.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Kamran Mirza. I'm an associate professor of pathology and laboratory medicine at Loyola University, Chicago. Our campus, the medical center, is in the Chicagoland area in one of the just western suburbs here. Here I serve as one of the vice chairs for education. And for many years, I've been one of the associate program directors for the residency.
Okay, great. Dr. Voss.
Hello, I'm Jeff Voss. I'm the program director at West Virginia University in Morgantown, West Virginia. I'm also a professor, and I'm the vice chair of anatomic pathology. And I also serve as the program director for our hematopathology fellowship program.
Dr. White.
Hi, I'm Christy White. I am the program director for clinical pathology at UCSF in San Francisco. We have two separate program directors there, one for anatomic pathology and one for clinical pathology, but we work very close together, and we interview applicants and work with applicants in both departments. I have been at UCSF since I was in medical school, and I'm currently a hematopathologist there. And absolutely love what I do. It's exciting to see you all.
Great. Dr. Samiti.
Yes, hello. Thank you for inviting me. This is great to see so many faces. So many people interested in pathology. I'm Ron Samiti. I'm an associate professor of pathology. I'm at the University of Colorado at the Anschutz Medical Campus. I do cytopathology and also head and neck pathology.
Dr. Sturgis.
Good evening to everyone. I want to thank you for inviting me. I'm not sure how I got the honor, but I appreciate it. And I'm at Mayo in Rochester, Minnesota. So just down the road from the University of Minnesota. And I've been here for only 1 year. So I'm new to the institution and relatively new to being a program director. I had for many years been the APD for anatomic pathology at the Cleveland Clinic. And when I left the Cleveland Clinic to come to Mayo, I kind of moved from the APD role into the PD role. My areas of interest in pathology are cytopathology, which is my kind of bag of tricks. And then I also do general AP here at Mayo and cover the breast consult service. So largely AP oriented. In previous jobs, I have worked in private practice and have been the medical director for microbiology laboratories. So I have a kind of a CP background a little bit. So thanks so much for including me.
Well, thank you. Dr. Yara?
Thank you very much for the opportunity. I've always been called upon last because of my last name, unless there's a panelist with a Z last name. Anyway, my name is Marwan Yared. I'm the program director here at Baylor in Houston. I'm also the chief of pathology at Bentab Hospital. And whenever I find time between those two responsibilities, I'm also a hematopathologist. I'm happy to be on this panel.
Well, you're not last today. We have Dr. Dolan.
Sorry. Hello, happy to be here. Thank you for having me. My name is Michelle Dolan. I am the program director at the University of Minnesota Medical Center. And I have been in that role for, gosh, probably 10 years or so now, with maybe an extra 5 years as an APD. I am APCP trained, but I work primarily now in cytogenetics. So most of my outlook right now is CP based, but I'm certainly pretty involved in AP training as well. So again, thank you for having me.
And Dr. Vitalis.
Hi, everybody. My name is Nick Vitalis. I'm a professor of pathology in Charleston, South Carolina at the Medical University of South Carolina. And it's kind of funny, unlike Dr. Yared, usually I come first with my name. I'm at the opposite end of the alphabet from him. But I'm the director of the residency program here. I'm also I'm a forensic pathologist and the director of our forensic pathology fellowship as well. And I've been, I guess, a program director for 6 or 7 years, and then an associate director for another 6 or 7 years before that. So thanks for having me. Look forward to talking to you guys tonight.
All right, well, thank you, everyone. Well, we will go right into the first question that has been pre-submitted by the audience. So the first question is, in light of limitations due to the pandemic, other specialties have posted official guidance on things like letters of recommendation and audition rotations. Can you shed some light on what you'll be looking for this year in terms of letters of rec, step exams, and audition rotations? So whoever would like to start.
Hi, this is Dr. Morgan, and I didn't get introduced, so maybe I should introduce myself if you want me to.
Yes, please. So sorry about that.
Did I go to the wrong thing? Sorry, so I will let the other panelists also answer the question, but I'm Elizabeth Morgan. I'm the program director at Brigham and Women's Hospital, and apparently there's a high correlation between PDs and hematopathologists because I'm also a hematopathologist.
All right, well, thank you so much. So whoever wants to take the first question, just what makes a competitive applicant this year, especially in light of the pandemic? What are you all looking for in letters of recommendation, step exams, etc.?
This is Nick. I'll go ahead and jump in first here. I think for the overall evaluation of the application this year, I don't know that a ton has changed. I know there's a lot of anxiety, I think, on applicants' ends, and having been to our program director meeting virtually last month, there's probably an equal amount of anxiety on the program ends. Certainly, away rotations, we know they're not not many are happening. There are some virtual away rotations and such, but I think pathology compared to some specialties that maybe like derm or ortho that are really, they almost require away rotations. At least for our applicants in the past, some have had it, some have not. And so the lack of an away rotation for us, I don't think is really dramatically going to affect things. And then, beyond that, most of the other stuff has changed. Presumably people are still able to get some pathology experience at their own institutions. Certainly for those folks that are, maybe foreign medical graduates or osteopathic folks who don't have a chance in their own institutions. Again, we'd be willing to consider it if they had maybe less pathology experience than in the past. But overall, I don't think our evaluation as far as the criteria we're looking at are going to change all that much.
I second what Dr. Batalis just said. As far as we're concerned here, we're not going to expect anything different in terms of letters of recommendation or step exams. In terms of electives, it's always good to know that a candidate did have some electives, but we understand perfectly well if this year this was not an option. Really, the value of electives, as we see it, is for you to get good letters of recommendation. So as long as you get those, and if they're all from pathologists in your own institution because you just couldn't travel, that's perfectly fine.
Yeah, I agree with that completely. We aren't doing any audition electives at UCSF, so everyone's on the same playing field in that sense. The aspect of the interviews that I would say I'm most concerned about is really your ability to gauge what the program is like and what the residents are like and what the faculty is like. So I think for me, that's probably the thing that's changed the most. And we did hematopathology fellow interviews a few weeks ago, and it went totally fine. They're a little bit faster than normal interviews, and that's hard to even pinpoint why. An interview goes from 40 minutes to 25 minutes, but it was super easy and didn't feel different or weird, even from the interviewee's perspective.
Yeah, I would agree from having done fellow interviews. I agree with condensing the time. For some reason, it just seems to go faster. Maybe the small talk is less, I don't know. I think one good thing and I would second what people have said, where I don't think our expectations will be any different this year. We all are very familiar with the fact that people are unable to take away rotations. One thing that I think this panel will be good for is actually for us as program directors to hear what graduating medical students and applicants would like to see from programs that they're applying to, because I will just be out there and say that it's very difficult this year for us to know how to meet what applicants will want. It's going to be very difficult to show them, for us, the Twin Cities, our facilities. Everyone's going to be in the same boat. And I think we'd like to hear from you also in terms of how might you like interviews to go? Do you want breakout sessions with residents? Do you want one-on-ones with the chiefs? What are some of the things that you might like? Not to hijack the meeting, but just to say, I hope we get to hear from the applicants as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think I completely agree with everything that's already been said. I just wanted to say, at least for all the foreign medical graduates, I'm a foreign medical graduate, so I totally understand this stress associated with the lack of those rotations. And I can tell you that in a way, Dr. White said it right. It's leveled the playing field, right? And so before, there were always those foreign medical graduates who could do those electives versus not. But this time around, I know I always try and put a positive spin on it. The good news is that no one is doing those electives, right? And the virtual electives that Dr. Batalis mentioned, so for example, at Loyola, we will be hosting them. But to be honest with you, even when I accept people into those electives, I tell them that it's with a pinch of salt that you're doing this, because to be honest with you, a virtual elective may not hold any meaning really when it comes to looking at your application. But the thing that hasn't changed for all the foreign medical graduates, and even for the people who are from the United States, is the fact that I think that all of the program directors would likely agree that what we're looking for is a true intention to do pathology, right? And so wherever you are, you can participate in the pathology departments that are local, even if there's social distancing. And I think that one thing that we're very quick on picking up on is the fact that somebody has been interested in our field, right? And so as long as your application is shining through with that interest towards pathology, whether it was early on in your medical career or later on, that doesn't matter. But we can kind of gauge that somebody is true towards it. So I think that that's probably the most important point.
Yeah, I was just going to say something like this too. I agree with what you said, Cameron, and Dr. Dolan as well, that we're both at a disadvantage, both the programs and the applicants. But in terms of selection criteria, which the first question is about that, I don't think there's going to be a big change for most of us. But I agree with what Cameron's saying, and that is that one thing I look very closely at is letters of recommendation, and I know we're going to talk a little bit more about that in a question later. But we like to. I hate to read a letter and make it sounds as though we're like their second choice or plan B. So we're going to be looking. I'm guessing there's going to be more applications this year. There's probably going to be more interviews. So where do we make that cut? Well, my selection criteria are the same, but I'm going to be looking for that kind of thing, like you're saying. Is there a true interest and passion for this specialty and not just a plan B? So I think that's one thing we're going to be looking at. And if you make the cut based on those, the criteria we all use anyway, then we're going to have to talk about the interview process itself. How do we get information from each other so that you can feel like something about us and what this place is like, and same goes for us. So I think there's going to be a lot of that going on, because I think there are going to be more interviews going on overall, because there's no cost involved now. And I'd love to go to Minnesota. I'm from there, and so all you Minnesotans, I really miss Minnesota.
So I would echo everything that people say. There will be no change in our selection criteria. The only thing that's different this year, but not really related to COVID, is we're gonna go to pass-fail for step 1 in anticipation of the change that's coming. So we're gonna start this year looking at just pass-fail. So we're not gonna put weight on the actual number. So what we're generally looking for, like Dr. Voss said, is someone passionate about pathology, because I think as program director, one of the things we worried about is that are you going to be there for 3 or 4 years? We don't want it to be a second choice or a stepping stone for something else. And I've had experience where people applied pathology after first year, they actually jump to something else. So, but in terms of selection criteria, nothing has changed except for the step 1 that we moved to a pass-fail.
I want to say one thing. I think in some ways COVID is leveling the playing field in a certain sense, because whether the applicant is, in a very high-end North American allopathic training program, or the applicant is in a DO program or an international graduate, the thing in many instances that would allow people to do a lot of, visiting different locations and expanding their horizons is financial resources. And in this setting where, having great financial resources doesn't provide one with options that people who don't have great financial resources do, I think in a way that is kind of making the application process, maybe perhaps a little more fair or a little less biased towards people who have the time and the finances to travel a lot. So I think in some ways that may be kind of a good thing for the whole system. But like everyone else, I'm not really thinking of using any different criteria. I do think if we have applicants that look great on paper and they haven't had the opportunity to do a visiting experience with us, or even to have a US experience, that's something that in the past might have eliminated that person from, the cut to get an interview, but this year for me will not.
I would agree with everything that my co-panelists said. I think the number one thing that we're all looking for is someone who has a true passion for pathology. At the same time, we recognize that pathology is not always that prominent in medical school. And in fact, I think we would all congratulate you on finding what we think is the best kept secret in all of medicine, because we absolutely love what we do and we can't wait to nurture that in our trainees. And so what we're really looking for the most in these applications is a true love of pathology. It's okay if you don't have expertise in it. That's what our job is to teach you.
Okay, so let's move on. So a lot of applicants this year are wondering how they can gauge the culture of programs without an in-person visit. With only a virtual interview, like what steps are programs taking to make sure that applicants understand if they fit with the culture of the program?
I would say it's very difficult. Even pre-COVID is very hard. You know, one day or two, you get a snapshot of who we are. That being said, the virtual definitely adds some strength to it. So what we're trying to do, and we hope it works, we're going to have a virtual happy hour. So at the end of, we're going to have 2 happy hours per week. We're going to have you spend time with a group of residents. I think our chief resident is trying to find something, an activity, so at least to have an icebreaker and also give you a virtual tour of the campus to video, and also prior, if you are invited for an interview, prior to the interview date, you will get an email about a link about who we are, about a film, about the different site, the different location you're gonna be in. So at least when you come to the interview, you'll be ready to ask questions. And then we hope that would give you a little bit of who we are, and also we'll share some personal video and photo from the residents to see what it's like living in Colorado. So it's gonna be hard, but that's how we hope we'll be able to convey to you who we are.
I think that some programs have also kind of taken to social media a little bit to try and up the game. I think the departments are stressed because, for example, I can tell you that one of the highlights of Loyola Pathology is the camaraderie. Like, people come and interview and they think, oh, wow, the people are so nice. Everyone is very laid back. The cases are great. And, you know, there's really no way for us to show you that, right? And so like Dr. Samedi was saying, you know, happy hours are one way, you know, during the interview and stuff. And what we've been seeing on social media, at least, is that people have started doing open houses before the interview starts. You know, there have been several places that have open houses. There are numerous, I think, pathology accounts now that are doing, you know, meet our residents one by one. They're highlighting their PGY1s, what their interests are. You know, people are updating their websites. And so I think that there is a significant amount of small little things that can probably, like, you know, the entire jigsaw puzzle will not be solved, but I think people are trying, you know, for example, they're highlighting their faculty members, what their interests are, et cetera. So I think that that goes a little distance towards trying to figure out what those programs are like. It doesn't go all the way, but you know, this has been a big concern.
Speaking of open houses, this is exactly what we're having here at Baylor. We pride ourselves on many things in this program, but one of the major things is the family feel of our program. And just like others have said, how do you convey that virtually? It's nearly impossible. So we hope that the open house will convey as much as possible of that feel. It will be a mixture of allowing attendees to attend our morning didactic lecture, chat with the residents. We'll probably have a couple of pre-recorded videos to show, you know, and we'll see how that goes.
I think one of the challenges is that the advice that I will often give people when they're trying to make these difficult decisions is trust your gut. What does your gut say? That's how I've made a lot of the decisions in my life. And I think that will be much more challenging this year. Our solution to this is very similar to the things that other people have described. And I think our best ambassadors are our residents. And so we will just work to provide as much exposure for our applicants to our residency class, because I think that they are our biggest supporters. They are the closest to where you are and can let you know the real scoop.
Yeah. So at UCSF, we have ideas, we've polled the residents and have ideas of some of the things that we think would be helpful for applicants in terms of an introductory session in the morning and 2 different kind of get to know you sessions throughout the day, as well as attending grand rounds or didactics. But Dr. Dolan mentioned this earlier, that she would like to hear from you. And I think it would be very helpful to hear what you need in terms of getting to know the residents at all the programs and to getting to know the faculty. Because we can do those things if we know what they are.
Yeah, I agree. And I also loved what Dr. Morgan said. When I remember when I was looking at residency positions, which since I'm 147 years old was quite some time ago. But I got this great advice from someone whom I didn't really know well. And this person said to me, as you're walking around on your interviews, you'll get a feeling for the hallways that you feel like you fit in. And be aware of those, you know, kind of intangible things, because those are the things that actually mean you're kind of at home. And I think it's very challenging, as you all know, to have that kind of a feeling when the feeling is virtual. So, you know, we're all trying to have every kind of imaginable technology to take the place of or to shore up the absence of that real connection. And, you know, what's the best way to do that is I would love to hear what you all have to say so that we could then try to provide that to you.
I'm not sure if this is a good time for one of the students to jump in or not, but so hello everyone, I'm Amy. I actually am from like the Philadelphia area. I go to Philadelphia College of Osteopathic Medicine. It's nice to kind of virtually meet everyone. I'm currently on a virtual rotation with Dr. Mirza, and he's been awesome. But I really think that all of these ideas that you've been throwing out are really great and things that I would love to see, especially being able to communicate with the residents, because a lot of times when I go on program sites, I can't actually reach out to the residents, and that's something that's like kind of concerning, almost like, are you hiding your residents because they hate their life? Or like, so that's being able to communicate with the residents, I think, is a really big thing for me. And kind of like what was said before, just being able to kind of see the space. So like, if possible, maybe having a virtual tour or something of that sort, I think would be really good. Or being able to participate in a sign out or something like that might give a really good viewpoint for my perspective.
Amy, I have a question for you in response. So when you're saying that you're maybe going to a program's webpage and you're looking at maybe for links like that you could click on and connect up with someone, are you saying that you can find links for the faculty but not links for current trainees?
Yes, that's correct. A lot of times, like, not every site, but a lot of sites that I go on to, they'll have like the resident's picture and their name, but no real contact information. So it's like, I don't know how I can talk with them to see like, how do they like the program? How do they feel, you know, the program is preparing them for their future as a pathologist?
Thank you. That's good for me to know.
Amy, can I ask you a follow-up question to Dr. Sturgis's question? When do you think the timing is right for it? So let's assume that people don't update their websites, right? Because let's say the residents don't want to be contacted by email just by anyone, right? When do you think the timing is right for this? Would you like to talk to residents more once you've already interviewed, or do you want it to be that you've interviewed, you've kind of had a little bit of a feel, and then you want to go more in depth? The reason I ask is because would it make sense, let's say, then to have, let's say we interview 4 or 5 individuals a day, and for that one day, we have a resident ambassador for like as a contact person for later on, right? Like once you're done, that's the contact person. And another thing I would say is that many of our residents, I think pretty much across the board for all the program directors here, their residents have some sort of a social media presence as well sometimes, right? And you know, you can oftentimes find those links in the resident pages if they're okay with doing that. And then just, I guess this is like a long question, but would it suffice for it to be the chief resident, or would you want to hear from any resident?
So me personally, I think the chief resident would be fine. I think too, it's kind of nice to be able to connect with first year residents, which I know kind of can be an issue with updating the website and enough time and that sort of thing. But I mean, really any resident, and also to address like the timing question, I mean, kind of like looking into programs ahead of time, because in a way, it's like, instead of just applying so broadly, I think there's like 128 programs, and like if you were to apply to like 20 of them, it like really starts to add up, like money wise. So being able to gauge like, where would I want to go, where would I consider accepting an interview from, it might be better to be able to talk to the residents before the whole process.
Sure. Thank you, that's very helpful.
I wanted to follow up on one other thing that Amy mentioned, which was sitting in on signouts, or if you're interested in CP, maybe sitting in on blood bank rounds or something like that. I think one of the things that I'm sure all of the other program directors are thinking about is the fact that we are no longer constrained to one particular day or set of days because of the virtual nature. And we also recognize that a lot of you probably aren't able to take this as full free time during medical school because you're using this time to make up things that you might have had to sit out from when the pandemic started. So along those lines, I'm thinking that probably all of us are trying to think of creative ways, maybe through a resident ambassador, as you mentioned, to let you participate in parts of our program that don't have to be sandwiched on that particular day when you're doing your interviews. And you may even feel more relaxed in that situation and really get to understand what it's like day to day to be a pathologist. So I'd love to additionally hear some thoughts from people in the audience about what kinds of activities that we do day to day that you might want to, just hop on for half an hour when you had time between rotations, and the timing of it before, after, how long after an interview, or maybe within a few weeks of the interview.
If I can quickly speak. Hi, my name is Monica. I'm from the University of Queensland, and I'm an MS4. One thing I just briefly noticed about that kind of daily life of a resident is I've noticed a few residents on Twitter posting these little, I guess, I don't know if they're TikToks or just little Twitter videos of them throughout their day, and they make it into a big chain. And I think that's very helpful to see and get a really good and honest picture as to, oh, this is what they're doing. This is the kind of didactics they're engaging in. And I think that's very helpful to actually get a good picture. And it's unique because it's something we certainly never would have really expected to see before the pandemic. So I thought that was a really nice insight to that resident's life. And it's something I'd like to see from other programs as well.
Thank you, Amy and Monica, for the comments. That definitely help us. I'm taking note. I just want to say briefly, for University of Colorado, we're working very hard to update our website to make sure that we are competitive to get you guys. But typically, we do not put resident email on the page, and I'm sure many of the program directors here get a lot of email. So the last thing we want to do is flood over resident. But that being said, the TikTok, the social media is certainly, once you come for an interview, you would get exposed to many of our resident PGY1 to PGY4. So just because you go to a website, you don't see their contact information, not because we want to hide them, well, actually, we are protecting them because they have a lot of clinical duties, and I don't want them to be focusing on answering email from many people. So we can do that. So that's why you probably won't see their contact info on the website.
And most websites will, obviously have either the program director and or the program manager / coordinator. And we have people write in and ask to speak to one of the residents, and you can get in contact with them that way. But we don't put their email on the website either. But one thing I would just say that you all brought up, as far as having a resident ambassador, we decided to have that person not be the chief resident, somebody knowledgeable in the program for a while, but not necessarily the chief resident, just because in response to kind of wanting to understand the culture a little bit better, the chief resident won't be there when you show up the next year as a new resident. So we kind of wanted to pick somebody who was going to still be there in the year that you would start. So just throwing that in there.
There's a question on the chat about having applicants participate in sign out, and I want to speak to that for a minute. It causes problems with HIPAA to have outside people present during sign out, and I can't imagine that is going to happen anywhere, unfortunately. We discussed that at UCSF, and we will be doing, including applicants in an unknown session where you see how the faculty interact with the residents in terms of developing a differential diagnosis and narrowing it and how participation is. And I think that's helpful to know what goes on a little bit in terms of the culture, but actually sign out, like real sign out, we can't do.
Yeah, I would second that I think the HIPAA issue would be prohibitive in this particular situation, but certainly, to have residents or to have applicants involved in unknown sessions or consensus conferences where that identifying information is not presented would be certainly doable. One thing I'm also interested in hearing from, not that I mean to keep asking questions of the applicants here, but I'm wondering, given that travel will not be factoring in, how many more programs applicants will be considering applying to, and how that will impact just the sheer number of choices that applicants have available. Just something to think about perhaps if the discussion goes that way later on.
Hi, I would like to add something to what Monica said earlier. My name's Nisha Suryawarzana. I'm a MS4 at LSU Health Shreveport. I think I noticed, I was following a couple schools on Instagram, and something that I thought was really cool was actually at the Medical University of South Carolina, they took a picture of all their residents in the frozen room, and it kind of gave me a glimpse of like what their life is like on a daily basis. And I know at our school, for the MS1s, the MS3s and 4s have been doing like a day in the life type thing, where they kind of just walk them through what it would be like to, be on a rotation, what kind of things they do and things like that. But I also wanted to add that for a lot of people who may be not looking specifically or who aren't like social media savvy, it might be hard for them to access things like that. So I was wondering if maybe we could, or see schools add links to like interview dates or something like that, so that we know, okay, like they have a Twitter, they have an Instagram, and we know that it's available.
Hi, I'm sorry if I'm interrupting. I was actually interested in what Dr. Dolan was asking. Me being an international graduate, I'm currently a researcher at UAB. So my chances of getting into a top tier program for me it was already hard. But now that everyone's going virtual and there'll be a lot of options for everybody, a lot of people are going to be applying, and probably they might write a good statement of purpose for pathology, but at the same time, they might be applying for other programs too. I'm not very sure, just to keep their options open. And they do have other kind of experiences too. So if you ask me, I will be at least applying only to pathology, but making sure that I apply to all the programs that I can. Probably 100 programs. I know I'm spending a lot of money here, but at least I'm keeping my options open, and that's something that I'm pushed to do anyway. So thank you.
I'm curious to know if other people are kind of having that same mind frame or that same thought process.
Yes, I agree with Rajeshwari.
Hello everyone. So yeah, I also agree with Rajeshwari, because as an international medical graduate, I'm not getting enough opportunity for rotations this year, because I sent some emails and most of them replied that they are actually open only to US medical students. So yeah, I'm having difficulty in getting rotations. And the problem is I just love pathology and I would be applying only for pathology. So I agree with that.
That's a very good problem to have, Sohini.
Yeah, I know. I just got a link of Path elective and I found it very useful, at least for students like us. I'm going through it.
Rajeshwari, to your point, I think the ratio of programs that for international medical graduates have to apply for has always been a little bit higher, right? So we can't go by the American medical graduate numbers. You know, certainly everyone has to do whatever they feel comfortable with, you know, personally, financially, etc. But I think that this is definitely one of those questions that all graduates will be thinking about, that do the ratios of, you know, how many places you apply to change now in this particular setting. And I think one of our questions coming up with the host was about this.
If I can jump in real quick. Sorry. So I'm Allison Martin. I'm a M4 at Chicago Medical School at Rosalind Franklin University. Speaking both to like communication with residents and the number of applications, application fever always takes over. It happens every year. It's going to happen even more this year. I think most people are going to apply to more than the previous averages. Which is not great. It's not great for us financially. It's not great for you time-wise. And that's frustrating. And I think one way to help with that would be if we had that information up front. If your program has hard cutoffs for something, tell us so we don't waste our money and we don't waste your time. You know, I fully understand why residents don't want to have their emails out there and be bombarded with emails from hundreds of applicants. But you could get first and second years to put together an FAQ of questions that they asked on the interview trail and how they feel your program answers those. They could put together, you know, a document that says these are the things I was concerned about and these are the things that I asked, whether they're US or IMG or DO, whatever. And if that information is out there for us to find, be that on your website or on social media, we'll find it. And then that helps us make a decision up front and helps everybody streamline this process.
So I agree with Allison. I'm Sunny. I'm a research coordinator at the University of Illinois at Chicago. And I'm MD PhD. I'm very interested in pathology. I did like 3 postdoc in the United States, including Einstein College of Medicine, Washington University, and I'm IMGs. I'm American citizen, but I'm IMGs, so I agree with most of IMGs. Because we have light chance, so we would like to apply more program to make sure we have interviews. So this is very worrisome at this season because this is a virtual interview and we don't know what is the criteria for the program to screening for the applicants. So it's complicated, especially for IMGs.
I had one question. My name is Saida, by the way. I am an international graduate who will be applying from Canada. I just wanted to know that are the programs considering to kind of alter their specifications and their criteria in this pandemic? Would there be any changes in terms of what is written on their website?
So can I talk about criteria for a minute? So I think it probably, varies at every institution and probably even in every institution, department by department. At UCSF, we do not have any set criteria. We went to a process called holistic review 3 years ago. And we look at the whole application, and we have never, as far as I've been there, considered board scores. We do look at pass-fail, but we have matched several residents over the years that have failed a step at some point. And some of them are probably the best residents in our program. The one thing that I will look for in terms of boards is patterns. So if somebody, fails one step a couple times and fails another step a couple times and fails another step a couple times, it tells me that either the person has not had training that is preparing them for the boards, or the person is not a good test taker. And I think there's challenges for programs with either of those groups. It doesn't mean we've discounted anybody, but if somebody can pass boards, totally fine with that. In terms of other criteria, since we've went to this system of holistic review, we have matched several international medical graduates, which prior to that we hadn't had. And I believe now we have 7 or 8 in the program. And we have increased our diversity in the program, which has been a really good thing. So I think trying to figure out what the criteria are for every program is going to make you crazy. And I don't even know if that information exists. So I'd be very careful about that.
I completely agree.
I second what Dr. White said. While we do have criteria here at Baylor College of Medicine, we frequently forfeit them for the right candidate. And again, as Dr. White said, we've had some of our best residents be some of those people we forfeited those criteria for. So what does that say about our criteria? I don't know. People like to have criteria, but sometimes, looking at the application as a whole, again, makes a lot more sense. So please don't be too worried about what the criteria are. We make those criteria, we make those rules, and we break them all the time. So I would encourage you to apply to a program if you feel comfortable applying to it, no matter what those criteria are. I will go out of my way here maybe and speak for the other programs, but I doubt that any single program would stick so strictly to their criteria, blindly to the criteria. I just can't see that happen. We just, not in pathology, unfortunately, we do not, I think, have the luxury to do it.
I think that Dr. White said it so eloquently. I don't think that anybody can say it better, to be honest with you. I completely agree. But I just wanted, so we have the same thing. We were mandated by our GME at one point to, at least put certain criteria down on our website. Since then, we have removed it, or we're in the process of removing it. And we'll probably have a similar kind of description there about a more holistic type of thing. That said, though, since most of the program directors here seem to be in agreement about that, there will be programs though that will follow that criteria strictly. So you have to kind of be careful where you gauge it. I mean, it's absolutely correct that most likely people might step away from their criteria for the right candidate, but there will be programs that will very strictly apply their criteria. And in that case, your application may or may not make it through. So Allison, to answer your question, there isn't a perfect answer. I think one thing that helped me, hundreds of years ago, like Dr. Serge was saying, when I was looking was, if you have pictures and backgrounds of the residents that are there, that's very helpful, right? Because just like Dr. White was saying, that they're a more diverse program now, right? Compared to where they used to be. I think that diversity can, kind of be seen, right? And so take a look at their faces. You don't have to necessarily contact them for this part, but you'll know where the city is, right? And so even if you don't have an amazing video of like that city, at least you know about the cities, right? You can just Google them. And then you'll know about like the number of residents, the diversity of the residents. And so you're already kind of painting a picture about what the program is. I think Dr. Morgan had something to say, and I started speaking. I'm sorry.
Not at all. All I just wanted to make sure I didn't forget to say is that one of the things that we do require is 3 letters of recommendation. And I really like to look at somebody's application when it's complete. I read all of the applications. And so I encourage you to encourage your letter writers, and I'm sure all of us are letter writers as well and have letters we need to write. I encourage you to encourage your letter writers to get the letters in. We have, a longer time now before they have to be in, which is great. And I love when I open an application and it's complete.
Speaking of letters of recommendation, speaking of letters of recommendation, one of the submitted questions we had was, should all these letters come from pathologists, or should we have a mix of specialties represented?
This is Nick. I can go ahead and answer that. Can I just chip in one more thing about the criteria real quick? I just saw some of the question came up in the chat. So like others, we don't really have firm criteria that we post. One thing we did have is we wanted people to pass step 2 by the time we rank, just so that we don't get in a situation where somebody is all set, matches with us, is all set to start, but they can't because they can't get their medical license. And somebody brought up in the chat that, is that going to change this year? And it definitely will. We have our university, you have to pass step 3 by the end of your first year, but most of our first year residents couldn't get that done. So certainly that's one criteria that we did have as far as passing step 2 that we're going to have to relax, just knowing that it's hard to get those testing centers finished up. I'm sorry, Ashley Rose. What was the question?
About the letters of recommendation, if they should all be from pathologists or have a mix of specialties.
Sure. When I meet with my advisees, I generally tell them you need to have at least one from a pathologist, if at all possible. As we were talking about, it's come up several times. You want to make sure you really show people that you're dedicated and you have a strong interest in pathology. And so if you don't have any pathology letters, maybe it's circumstances you weren't able to, and we could understand that, but hopefully everybody could get at least, one letter, even if it's from a basic science pathologist that they didn't rotate with. 2 is nice. I don't think 3 is a necessity at all. I'd much rather see a strong clinical letter from somebody who got to know you very well on a medicine rotation or family practice that really can speak to your personal attributes than kind of a generic paragraph that, I sat down with somebody, he passed sign out twice this month and, they seemed all right. So I put my 2 cents in, at least 1, maybe 2 path letters, but certainly the meat of them is more important to me than where they come from.
One of the red flags I think everyone should be very careful of, and even request their letter writers, is that you don't want a letter which is really strong and it says that I'm recommending this person for internal medicine. That's a huge problem, right? So, to be honest with you, we have interviewed candidates that had 3 letters from non-pathologists, right? But their first statement was, I love this candidate and this letter has been written for pathology specifically, right? And sometimes that actually becomes even more helpful, right? That, a surgeon is berating the candidate that, oh, I thought this person should become a surgeon and I'm so sad that they're becoming a pathologist. But that to me makes me really happy, right? That, this clinician, whoever, some other clinician, physician thought that this person would be a great pathologist, whatever that means. So I completely agree with Dr. Vitalis on that, but just make sure that it's for pathology.
I would agree that. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead, Dr. Voss.
I was just gonna say, I would agree. It would almost be not really believable if you got a lot of letters from only pathologists, unless you were a PSF or something, to have had that amount of time, because we all know that when you go and rotate, you probably spend 2 to 4 weeks in the department and spend a couple hours with everybody. So to have lots of letters from only pathologists might even be a little fishy. But I agree with what everyone's saying. As long as you have strong letters that either say, darn, I wish this person would be whatever my specialty is, but fine, they'll be a good pathologist too, that's great. Or just a strong letter from especially a person that you spend a significant amount of time with that can really vouch for your character and your work ethic and all that, goes miles for me. Just so long as the whole thing doesn't say this person is going to be a great person in my surgery program or, you know, in ophthalmology. That drives me nuts, because then you know your plan B. So, but yeah, definitely they don't all have to be from the pathologist.
And I would say that would also include researchers. Some of you may have had extensive research background, or you may be MD PhDs. Some of the strongest letters I've read have been with people who have had very extensive, long, very close working relationships in research. And I think that can be very helpful as well.
Matter of fact, if you are a PhD, I would say it is almost expected that you get a letter from the person you did PhD with. If they can vouch for you, who can?
All right, well, fantastic discussion we're having, and I'm seeing there's a lot of questions in the chat. So one of the questions kind of mirrors one of the pre-submitted questions we had, and it's simply, the question is, with online interviews and the lack of audition rotations, how can applicants this year really distinguish themselves virtually?
I love
that. Virtually,
silence.
I don't know if virtually at that point it's already too late, right? It's because your application is already put together. But I think your letter, your personal statement will speak volume about why you're interested in pathology, the letter of recommendation. I mean, and like someone mentioned earlier, we understand that some of those auditions are not available. So we'll put that in context. But your letter, your personal statement, I will start there.
Yeah, I think, you know, just making sure, you know, all your ducks are in a row. So on October 21st, when the program directors open things up, we have everything in front of us. I know there was a question about the interview timeframes and how that's going to go, and I'm sure that'll vary by program. Some may get going right away, last week of October, first week of November. Some may go into January, but you know, I think it's important to have everything ready to go as soon as we can look at those applications on October 21st. You know, as far as, you know, again, we talked about culture, and I was very worried about getting our culture of our program across to the applicants. And again, this has been comforting to hear from you guys and hear from the other panelists that they're having that kind of the same anxiety. But honestly, after things like this have taught me, you know, I feel like I already knew Dr. Mirza fairly well from a CAP committee, but I feel like I know some other panelists and some other students just from these brief interactions here. So again, maybe one of the side benefits from the pandemic is we've gotten a lot more comfortable with video conferencing and this sort of thing over the last few months. So I'm actually feeling a lot better about just meeting the applicants and getting a good feel for them doing this than I was when I first heard that we had to do this, and, you know, kind of my jaw dropped. So that's what I would say.
Hello, hi, I have one question. My name is Javaria Rahman, and I'm doing Masters in Pathology from Case Western Reserve University. So my question is that for a resident who will be interested in research, so how do the programs will support them?
So I think that probably varies widely by program. It's probably completely different in terms of funding and resources available. It is, most programs I think that have that information on their website. And the one comment that I would have is that due to the impact of COVID financially on a lot of academic programs, there have been some changes in research funding at multiple institutions, and I think that's an important thing to ask about when you interview. But it's going to vary, so we can't give you a blanket answer.
I would echo that. I think, you know, it really depends on the nature of the specific program to which you're applying. We have, here at Mayo, we have like a research track for a candidate each year.
Okay.
The funding for that particular spot is secure, but we have had a diminution in kind of other funding for other research endeavors because of COVID. And I think that's going to be the same everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And the best way to know what those resources would be to ask in the individual program. To go back to the question just a little bit, which I think was how to distinguish yourself or to stand out in a virtual environment, I would just advise everyone to be you, because, you know, wherever you're going to go, you want to be happy and feel like this is a good place for you. And if you're just you in the interview and that fits well, then you're going to end up being happy there. So I wouldn't go into it thinking like, what do I need to do to make myself stand out? Clearly you want to, comb your hair and brush your teeth and wear something that looks decent, but it's not a show. It's just getting to know each other. And if you're just you, you'll be successful in that way, I think. And I can't change it, so.
I think one more way to maybe distinguish yourself is to actually participate in any virtual online meeting events that a program is putting together. So if they have an open house, whatever they have, if you participate and then you apply, you're already a known entity to a point when we are reviewing your application, and that, I believe, gives you a bit of an edge.
One other thing that I think is important to do, and this holds true for even in-person interviews, but I see happen a lot, is I always ask applicants if they have any questions and allow time, because I think your experience interviewing is to get your questions answered. And time again, I have people look at me and say no. And I feel like if you have an opportunity with face-to-face time with faculty, or residents, whether it's it's in person or virtual, that is really your opportunity to get your questions answered. So I would say think about some questions, and you won't have time for, 5 or 10 or 15 or 20, but you probably will have time for 1 or 2. And one thing that I think happens with people is they say no because their question has been answered. But if you ask the same faculty, you talk to 5 faculty and 5 residents and you ask them all the same question, I think it's very helpful for you to see the breadth of answers and how people respond to that. And if it's the same between faculty and the same between the residents, or the same between faculty and residents, do they perceive the institution as the same way? So think of what is important to you, and I would say come up with 1 or 2 questions that address that so you get your information.
Like Dr. I've had this exact same experience, and I always say to the person, if you're not asking me the question because you've already asked the question to someone else, I think as laboratorians, this is a good analogy. Asking the same question to 3 or 4 people is like quality control. It's a way to see like what's really going on out there. If you get 5 different totally polarized different answers, then there's something's amiss. So, seize that opportunity, ask the question, even if it's a question you've already asked.
Absolutely, and have it be a high-level question, not just, what's your sign-out rotation? Is it a 3-day or a 1-day? Have it be some bigger, higher-level questions about the atmosphere, the culture, support for research, that type of thing. That, again, I totally support asking multiple people the same question.
Yeah, I was just going to say that the interview process is still very similar. We're only spending a very brief amount of time with you. And in that time, we're trying to, you've made the cut on paper. So now we're trying to assess interpersonal skills and whether or not you're interested. And how do you do that better than to be prepared? And being prepared means to have questions. And now in this season, there's plenty of material to ask about. How did you guys sustain your education with your program during COVID? But that's a nice topic, because obviously it's going to affect you as well, and shows whether or not we were creative enough to keep our residents educated through all this. And then you can't actually be there, so there's lots of questions about the place and what it's like there, and you can go into all that. So there's lots of material to ask about, and like I said, it really shows interest. It shows that that you prepared for that interview, and that makes everyone feel like it was a good interview. So. But I would say the interview itself really is not all that different in the sense that it's a short, brief interaction. It's just that you're looking at a screen instead of face-to-face. So I really like the idea of having questions, because I get this all the time too, where you ask, you have any questions? No, I'm good. I'm like, well, I'm your first interview and I am the program director. Come on, you got to know something. And they're like, well, how much call do I take? I'm like, okay, maybe something a little bit bigger than that. But so I think all those things just have to play into it, because it's just like any other interview. It's a very short time to impress.
And one thing I'll say also, if you get, if you're asked, why me? Why did you apply to my institution? Having no answer tells me, I don't know if it's a red flag, but tell me that you're just applying randomly. You're not really interested in me, in my program, the resident. So you will get that question, some version. Why are you applying to Loyola? Why are you applying to Brigham? Why are you applying to Colorado? So have some answered ahead of time. Why did you choose us to apply?
That's really great. I think, you know, to piggyback off that, you know, I mean, the question is, how do you differentiate yourself? So, I mean, I think that the rules of interviewing obviously are very important, right? Now you have to be careful and be sure that the light is right. I mean, I know nobody really cares about these things, but you have to come across now in the best possible light, right? So make sure that you're in a quiet place, you have all the right questions, all that etiquette that you require for the interview. But I think that the example I would give is that, you know, programs are also trying to now present themselves in the best light, right? And so some programs are updating things, they're starting things, they're doing open houses, right? And all of you applicants, all of you candidates are appreciating that, right? So similarly, whatever you do, thinking outside the box, given the circumstances that you're in, highlight that, right? I mean, so similar to how you're looking at a program and thinking, wow, it's virtual season and this program really stepped up. Northwestern did an open house 3 times and we're so impressed, right? So that's just Northwestern. It's a great, great program, right? They probably didn't even need to do any of those things, but they did because they saw the circumstance and they differentiated themselves. So similarly, whatever you think that you can do within your means to differentiate yourself, when we do this holistic review of your application, it'll shine through. So don't poo-poo anything. You know, everyone has a different mechanism. I start with the personal statement. I don't even look at the score. I don't do anything. And I read the first paragraph of the personal statement. I can tell you, I have I wish I could show you. I have like a pack of personal statements that I've printed and kept because some of them are so good. There, you know, it could be anything that catches you. You know, it could be a mundane statement, but it could be written in a way that was really nice, right? And to be honest with you, I start gauging my interest based on the personal statement, right? And so here we are like thinking about virtual electives and all of this stuff, which is great, right? Because it'll hopefully try and differentiate you. But then don't not pay attention to the things that are routine, right? The personal statement has been there throughout, and it's something that we're very used to looking at, right? So just make sure that you do all the usual things well, and that if you have done something that is a little bit different because of the circumstance, try and highlight it, because I think it'll help us as well.
Another way that candidates have often relied on to distinguish themselves is sending letters of preference after the interview. So one of the questions we had is, should candidates do this, send the letters of interest to their top programs, and how do programs view these letters?
I actually appreciate it when I receive such emails from candidates who interviewed here at Baylor. I really like it. I think it's a nice gesture. Now, don't go crazy. Don't send me 16 paragraphs, and I've received some of those, unfortunately. Just like saying, this is why I love your program. This is why I'm interested in it. This is what I would bring to the program if you, if we match. And, just be appreciative. And that to me goes a long way.
Also add, be careful saying to everybody that you're their top program. Dr. Mirza, we serve in the committee together. We talk, I mean, frequently. So I'm not saying we're going to talk about our applicant, that's what I'm saying, but be careful if you go around him. And in Boston, for example, Brigham is next to Beth Israel, Mass General, people talk. So just be honest about who your top programs are. Don't say a blanket statement to 100 institutions said, you're my top program. So we might know.
It's a small community, and as Dr. Samedi said, we talk, and we can detect when it's the same email that went to every program that you send. We can detect that. So it's nice if you personalize it somehow by adding some detail. You know, if there's something specific that you did or saw or heard in the program, mention it in that email, and that will tell me that you're specifically mentioning my program and not just, sending me another a blanket email.
I mean, I think a thank you, oops, sorry.
Go ahead, please, Dr. Dolan.
No, I was just going to say, I think a thank you note is different than an email or a note saying I'm ranking you, as top on my list, because I think anyone who's been in the position long enough has been burned by that, because you know how your rank list turned out that you absolutely were not ranked what they said they were. So be honest, that's above all. And also, I'll be honest, that doesn't change how I view the applicant. I mean, if that's how the match system works. So you can rank us at a certain level. I'm still going to rank you as an applicant honestly in the same way we would. What you would say to me about your position, how you're ranking us, doesn't affect that.
I think that, the honesty bit is so important, especially within the program. So for example, like Dr. Yared was saying, if you send all, 5 of your interviews the same exact email, like typically we just forward those emails to our education coordinator, which who keeps them in a file. So it'll be the same email, right? Which isn't, I mean, it's not necessarily a bad thing. We're not going to unrank you because of that. But the thing is that, if you're making an effort, right, and writing people, different things, make sure that your emails like look reasonable, right? If you've copy pasted, oftentimes the font is all different, right? We can tell these things, right? It says dear so-and-so in a different font, and then you get the gender wrong, and then the whole other paragraph is like copy pasted. Please don't do that, right? So the idea is that if you're going to differentiate yourself, then put a little bit of effort in all of those things, then it's worth it. And if you don't want to send a thank you note, it's again, not a deal breaker, like Dr. Dolan was saying. Like, we're probably not going to, like, God forbid, if there's a candidate who may not make our rank list, the thank you note may not change that, right? But if you're already going to make the rank list, and if you're really going to be, you're going to be super stellar, then the thank you note won't change that either. However, it's a polite thing to do. And if you don't hear back from programs, I think most programs don't write back to their candidates at all. I think that those are part of the rules. So that's not a personal thing. We've looked at the email and we've seen it and we've probably stored it somewhere. But don't expect that everybody will write back to you. That's just normal.
And just to be clear, I said I appreciate receiving those emails. I'm not saying that they are required. We have certainly ranked people who have not written to us after they interviewed and they match with us, and they're extremely happy to be here, and we're extremely happy for them to be here.
I would also add, it is a nice, polite thing to do to, have a follow-up email to say, thanks, I had a nice interview and this is why I like your place. But I would also discourage, I've had applicants that have given me weekly emails thereafter to keep reminding me who they are, and as they get closer, they kind of get more frequent as we get closer and closer to the match season, or to the match list time. So I wouldn't do that either, because that gets a little annoying. But certainly a follow-up email is a polite thing to do, but not necessary. And to give everybody a message about you being their top choice, I've been burned enough times to know that I don't really believe it anyway, so it wouldn't affect the way I rank you either. So I would say it's not that necessary.
I would agree. We'd always like to hear from people. And I think it's important to know that pathology is such a small community, and most people have a small number of spots. And this is a very manageable number of people that we interview. We remember you. We know who you are. We love to hear from you. But as Dr. Voss said, it wouldn't be necessary to email us weekly, because you're a part of a special cohort that we were really excited to invite to our program. But yeah, we love to hear from you. And sometimes I even get handwritten notes, if anyone remembers that. And that's okay too. It's a little scary because you don't know, did it really go to the right place? But feel free to reach out to a program coordinator to get email addresses or a correct mailing address. But always nice to hear.
There's been a lot of chatter about throughout a bunch of different specialties. There's been chatter that institutions are going to be more likely to take their home students than they have been in previous years. It might be harder for students to match somewhere different geographically. What do you think about that? Is that likely to be the case?
I would say it's very hard. Go ahead, Dr. White.
I was going to say that I think there are very few institutions that have a lot of people applying in pathology. I mean, we generally have one, sometimes two, sometimes zero. So I don't think that's going to change at all. Not at UCSF.
I echo that. There's no way we can fill our class with our medical school And we're still going to be ranking people based on the application, not so much of where they're coming from, even if from the institution. One thing we do have for courtesy, if you form the institution, you will get an interview, but doesn't put you ahead of anybody else.
And I think we're all quite worried about the reverse, which is that people are not going to want to go to programs that are in a city they've never visited before. They didn't get a chance to spend time in. So I think from our end, we're also very interested to know if you apply to our program, but you aren't from our area, you've never been there before. We hope that you'll still consider it.
Yeah, that's definitely the case here in Mayo. You know, we're a small city in Rochester. We don't have professional sports. We don't have big museums. We have the Mayo Clinic. And, you know, I think we have the risk that people might apply, but then not truly be interested in coming here. And then we may end up in a shortfall where all the people we've interviewed weren't really sincere about, you know, visiting with us. And I don't know that there's a way for me as a program director to know, you know, where that will fall. And in this time, it's, you know, especially challenging, I think.
If I could quickly
If I may, okay, go ahead, Krishna, it's totally fine.
Thank you so much. Is there any thoughts about second visits in the spring? I don't know if this is going to be formal or informal.
That's a great question. And what I have been thinking here at Mayo is a little while ago, we talked about having these experiences where people might spend, you know, 30 minutes in an area of their choice, like say the applicant is very interested in blood bank. And in the past, if we would have had a, you know, quote unquote, second interview, that would have required travel, but we could have someone come back and look. And if we know what it is they're for which they are looking, we could tailor that experience in a second look to, you know, the specific, you know, niche areas that they want to see. So I was kind of hoping that I could use that second look time as a chance to showcase little areas of the department for people who we think are really, you know, possibly going to come spend time with us. I'd love to hear what the other program directors think about that.
No, I had not thought about the idea of a second look visit post-interview, but I love that idea, and I can do that. And it makes sense. We always have a diversity second look session, which I think is limited by travel to some extent, but this year that's not an issue. So I think if we can create a second look, that's a great idea.
Last year we had the second visits for the first time. I believe it was 3 candidates and they all matched with us. So it works.
It's something that we've talked about. We're unsure whether we're going to do the virtual open house ahead of time, but one thing as we were going through our discussions, the second look type visits are something that I think we're definitely going to pursue. Part of the open house was how do we get disseminated enough to make sure we get enough folks interested. So we still may do it, but we felt like for the second look visits, we now have the 50 or 60 people we've interviewed. So we kind of have a captive audience, and that, you know, another chance for them to get a look. And again, as Dr. Sturgis mentioned, if they can kind of tailor it to their experience, or, you know, meet with certain residents or faculty, we're certainly going to do something like that.
All right, well, great. Oh, sorry.
No, sorry. Hi, I'm Tanya. I'm an IMG from El Salvador. Pleasure to meet you all. I have a question. Since you're all talking about a second look, are U.S. programs applying to or interviewing more applicants, or thinking about having more people doing the second looks? Thank you.
So we are not interviewing more people. I can't possibly interview one more person than I already do. We interview between 70 and 80 people every year, depending on how many spots we have, and we'll probably keep that the same. But I like the idea of a virtual second look, and I don't know that there's a reason to limit that, depending on how it's arranged.
At Mayo, what we've decided to do is stick with the kind of the same number that we would have historically interviewed, between 70 and 80, like Dr. White was saying. But we have 2 weeks at the end of our scheduled interview season where kind of near the end we plan to reassess and see, you know, kind of where we think we are, keeping the door open. And we could add up to maybe 12 more primary interviews if we feel that that's necessary. So we're keeping it the same, but keeping kind of the door open to potentially add as the season goes along.
Yeah,
Same thing for us, as Dr. Sir just mentioned. So it depends what the pool, what we have, pool of applicant. We typically interview 10 people per spot. So at the most, we might increase by 15 or 20 more, but at this point, no real plan to increase the number of invitation, but that could change. It's not set in stone. It depends on the pool of applicant that we get.
And here, our plan is to interview about 10 candidates per available spot, which is what we usually do, and we're not going to change that this year.
We're in the same boat as far as that goes. And again, our national program director meeting last month, that, you know, somewhat of a moving target. People could change from their plans in July, but we had a Zoom session and there was a pop-up survey, and I think maybe 70–80% we're going to plan on interviewing the same, or maybe a little bit more next year or this year. We're taking the same approach as Dr. Sturgis, probably going to go, we do about 10 spots per applicant, as others have mentioned, and then with the flexibility of potentially adding more. You know, a lot of that comes down to, I think, you guys that are interviewing. We talked about people sending out additional applications. I think that, you know, part of that comes down to, again, program directors and experience. If we still interview 50 people, as we always have, but we're getting different candidates, you know, we always get some MD, PhD candidates and AOA candidates, but it's not really the bulk of them. If I interview all 50 because people are widely applying, you know, that's not going to work for us. So I think we plan to still interview the same amount, but again, really keeping an eye on the applicant pool. You know, again, I've been done this for, you know, 12, 13 years. We kind of know kind of what our sweet spot is. And again, I don't think that should change dramatically.
So it's the same at Loyola Pathology. We did have a discussion with our program director, and we do anticipate sometimes, you know, in previous years with the timeline, typically, like if we had too many interviews scheduled in January or February, people would just start falling out and like just, you know, saying that they get tired. There's, you know, I mean, travel is difficult. And we are anticipating that this time that probably won't happen, that, you know, anyone who accepts the spot will, you know, there were only a few, like 1 or 2 people who would like probably stop interviewing towards the late end of the season. But now, since travel isn't an issue, we are expecting that most likely everyone will keep those commitments, which is great. But I think we're not going to change the number a whole lot now.
Yeah, you know, one of the things I'm actually worried about, Kamran, is that people will apply to twice as many places. And if they normally apply to 15, they'll apply to 30. And I don't know anyone who's ever completed 30 interviews. And that what's going to happen is they're going to go through and then they're just going to cancel all the ones at the tail end. So I am very concerned about all of my late interviews getting canceled. And we also have a buffer of 2 to 3 weeks to add on people for primary interviews if we need to, but it's, I don't know, it's a bag of tricks this year.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think one of the things that's really challenging for all of us to think about are the logistics of this. So I remember, Monica, you said you're from University of Queensland, and my sister-in-law is in Brisbane. So, you know, it's morning for you, but evening here. And so we're really going to have to adjust our timeframes that we interview people to allow for West Coast people, to allow for people in other countries, to at least not be 3 o'clock in the morning. But at the same time, I have to somehow get my faculty on board. They're not going to be here at 10 o'clock at night interviewing people either. So I think for that reason, and perhaps other programs are doing this as well, we're condensing our interview days so that we can offer a variety of times that we interview people. But also because the interview season is shortened, because we're not going to get your applications till October 21st, but the match lists or the rank lists still go in around the same time. We're really having to think of creative ways that we can get all the same amount of work and maybe a little bit more done in a flexible time period.
Fantastic. And that transitions well into a lot of questions we've been getting about the format and logistics of the online interviews. So some of the questions that I've seen in the chat and that have been submitted before this were, will there be one interviewer at a time, or will you be interviewing in front of a panel with the other interviewees? Other questions were about etiquette of interviews. Should you use virtual backgrounds? What should you plan on doing for your backgrounds? And then there have been a few questions about, will this interview season be pushed back, or will it be similar to pre-COVID? So there's a few questions there.
From our standpoint, we're planning on trying to mimic our former interview day as much as we can. Understanding there's Zoom fatigue, but others have mentioned doing the happy hour kind of hangouts the night before. We're probably going to be reducing our interviewers. We used to do 6 interviews a day. We're going to probably trim that down to 4 interviews. Again, try and get some additional resident kind of hangout time during the day, have folks attend conference. So we're trying to basically kind of keep the same interview and condense it. As Dr. Morgan or Dr. White, I think, mentioned, that also allows us, we'd always done morning interviews, but when East Coast time, 8 o'clock is not going to be great for people in California, waking up at 5 a.m. So yeah, condensing the day, I think, will help with that. As far as virtual backgrounds go, again, I think that could kind of go either way. It could be part of kind of expressing yourself and expressing your personality. But I would just say, as an interviewer, you wouldn't want it to be distracting, because again, you're only going to have 20 minutes to kind of, or 20, 30 minutes, however it goes, to have that conversation. And, 5 of it's talking about your background. Again, maybe that's a good thing, maybe not. So I guess that's probably more of a personal thing, but you wouldn't want it to be a distraction.
I would say also make sure you have good internet connection. I would try that the day before, or make sure that you test the speed and whatever that's needed, because we're not going to penalize you if it's choppy, but it will be much easier if we can have a fluid conversation. It's already virtual, so I will definitely make sure, I think your internet connection might be more important than the background. And in terms of, we plan to interview 5 people a day, but 20 minutes each. We understand, if you do more, if people get tired. And so I think within 15 to 20 minutes, we might be able to extract information. Hopefully you'll be able to extract information from us as well. So, yeah.
We're planning to do that. The interviews themselves will be individual, though. The interviews will not be a panel like interrogation, but just when you're actually talking, it'll be one-on-one. There may be a point where you're in, like, what do you call it, like the chat room or something in the beginning, or waiting room or something, and you might be around other people. And when you meet the residents, there may be more than one person there, obviously, but the actual interviews are going to be one-on-one, just like they would be in person.
Our actual interviews are going to continue to be one-on-one also. The only time that you will be with more than one person is, like when Dr. Voss said, is when you're in one of the breakout rooms waiting for the interviewer. So how we set it up is you get one link and everybody dials into the link, and then we can put you in a breakout room with your interviewer. And we have an admin person who does that. In terms of background, I have no strong opinion, but would agree with Dr. Vitalis that as long as it's not super distracting or inappropriate in some way, you're probably fine.
So we'll be doing it the same way Dr. White said, as one room with breakout rooms. And as far as background is concerned, again, I don't care. I've been told that my background is extremely distracting, and there's something moving in the background. If you look, there's a DNA thing that's moving. And somebody told me, and this is like a very important person who was like grooming us for like, interviews or whatever, she said that makes you look shady because it's moving. So, there are people who interpret things, hopefully I'm not coming across as shady, but this is my office and I tried the green screen and it didn't work. So, I personally don't care. So, but I agree with what Dr. Vitalis said.
I would, that the folks who are perhaps the most important people, especially when we were talking about sending personal notes or follow-up emails, and in this case where someone is going to be putting you in and out of the common area when you call in, are the coordinators. And my coordinators are people whom I ask at the end of the interview, were the people who were applying professional with you, and what were your thoughts? Because sometimes people kind of let their guard down when they're talking to someone who isn't the boss or isn't the physician. So those people are, you should treat them with immense respect. And those are the people who you really should send a note to in follow-up, you know, thanking them for their time. But we're going to do like 6 individuals a day, which is similar to what was done in the past. And all the interviews will be one-on-one except for combined times with the trainees.
Dr. Sturgis, you've given away our secret. Now everybody knows we do exactly the same thing. Our coordinator is actually the person who probably ran. I'm just joking. She doesn't rank everyone, but like her opinion is the most important, right? And so she's part of that committee. And Dr. Sturgis has given it away. So now we can't use that criteria anymore, at least for the 111 people here. That's great.
I would say also that the background isn't important. What is more important, I believe, is the environment you're in. Please make sure you are in a quiet environment. And I understand it may be difficult if you happen to be home and you have, I don't know, kids or a dog or something, but, you know, try as much as possible to get some only you time somewhere in the house where you're not going to be distracted by anything other than the, you know, so that you can focus on just what you're doing and talking to the person you're talking to. With regards to the coordinator, our coordinator is actually part of the selection committee. And while her vote is not necessarily the most important vote, she actually does vote. And her vote is as important as mine or that of the chairman or that of anyone else in that committee. So yeah, team, please be nice to them.
I would also, oh, sorry, Ashley Rose. I'm just going to say, also be patient with us because this is the first time any of us have done anything like this. I have a big program and one program coordinator who's going to have to try and figure all of this out. So also just, you know, there might be hiccups along the way and just be patient with us and know that we're really trying our best.
So we've reached 9:30, so I want to give the panelists an opportunity to make any final comments.
I just want to
what Dr. Morgan said, be patient with us. We're very excited to meet each one of you. But it's a new thing for us. We are trying to impress you the same way you're trying to impress us. And so be patient with us. And we're looking forward to, I'm looking forward to see your application. So, and thank you for the invitation. Thank you for all of you for taking the time to be here.
Yeah, and thank you to Emily and Ashley. You did a really good job. It's pretty impressive.
Thank you.
I'll just echo that. You know, I appreciate having the chance to be involved. Again, it just put some of my anxiety at ease to hear some of the other program directors that we're all on the same page, even though we're on different size programs, different areas of the country. And it's also been, you know, very valuable hearing directly from the students, you know, both, you know, live and then kind of following the chat, because again, a lot of you guys are asking us what we're going to do, but a lot of it is trying to anticipate what you guys want from us. So it's been very, very helpful for me. So I just want to thank you guys for inviting me and let me participate.
I also want to give a shout out to Emily and Ashley Rose and the Virtual Pathology Student Interest Group. If you guys aren't part of it, you definitely have to follow them because I think it's a fantastic group and what an amazing thing that they've put forward. I know that they have some amazing things coming down the pipeline too. So, you know, stay in tune with them. And my second advice for all the candidates is to be genuine. We can see it when you're genuine and we love that, right? And we can see it when you're faking it and we don't like it. So just be yourself.
And Ashley and Emily, thank you very much for putting this together. You did a fantastic job. I have to say, I feel a bit better now that I've heard the concerns that other program directors have. Just tells me that I'm not alone in this. And thank you very much for the opportunity and looking forward to seeing your application.
I would say be well and stay safe, everybody.
Thank you also for having me. I really appreciate the invitation. And all I would say too is just, you know, this is another year. It's going to be a little bit different, but it's still the same concept of the interview. So I think if nothing else, this chat has been very good for alleviating some of those fears, especially for me, because I've really enjoyed hearing what everybody has to say. And there's some really good ideas out there to get us through this. But don't overjudge us on the way we act. I'm kind of awkward in person, and on this, it's even worse. So that has to go both ways.
And I just want to say thank you also. I'm certainly, you know, you often see signs that say we're all in this together. So just bear that in mind. We are all in this together, and we're finding our way to the end goal, which I think we all have. We all want to match with great people. We're happy to show our programs to you. Look forward to meeting you. And hopefully, Ashley, Rose, and Emily, again, this was really a great Zoom. I very much enjoyed it. Will there be a way for us to hear any other questions that come up? Because I'd be happy to answer anything that comes up.
That's a really great thought. Maybe the virtual PathSig, we could put together some kind of event where we could get feedback from prospective applicants and then kind of disseminate that to you, the program directors that would be interested.
I want to thank Emily and Ashley Rose very much for inviting me. I am very social media shy, and my residents have been giving me a really hard time about it, and we're really going to try and have a social media presence soon. But this has really shown me the power of connecting with people all over the world. If the pandemic has taught us anything good, it's that this is an amazing way to communicate. So I really appreciate being included, and I'm sure we'll have a hashtag soon, someday.
Okay, so on behalf of PathSig, I'd like to thank all the panelists for taking part and the audience members for submitting questions. This has been recorded, so it's going to be posted online for you to look at later. And make sure to follow the virtual PathSig. We're on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Reddit, and even TikTok. So thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Good luck to everyone.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Goodbye. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you,
Thank you.